So it has started.
So, welcome to this IUCN webinar series, which is the 5th episode of the IUCN this webinar series, in which the topic is why conservation will be fundamental to tourism-based livelihoods post-COVID-19. And this today's webinar series under the IUCN Leaders for Nature program, we are partnering with the Balipara Foundation on this very, very important theme of today's webinar, that is integrating naturenomics in tourism industry. And in today's webinar, we have very, very good eminent panelists who are specialists in this field, and the detailed introduction will be given by the Prabir when he will be taking up further for the moderation. But let me just briefly tell you about the today's panelist. We have Ms. Husna-Tara Prakash. She is owner and managing director of Glenburn Tea Estate and Boutique Hotel in Darjeeling. And Mr. Prabir Banerjea, he is a co-founder and managing member of the Balipara Foundation. Ms. Shoba Mohan, she is a founder partner of Rare India. Mr. Raj Basu, he is advisor tourism government of Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. And Ms. Bharti Chaturvedi, she is founder from the Chintan, India. And Dr. T.P. Singh from the IUCN Asia Regional Office, Bangkok. So we have a very, very strong panel today. And taking it further, let me first briefly introduce you about a little update about the IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. It is one of the oldest and now you can say one of the largest conservation network organization globally, which was initially set up in 1948, and it has contributed a lot in more than 70 years of journey in shaping the global conservation agenda, ranging from the World Conservation Strategy, then coming up of the Rio Conventions, and now in the present context, post-2020 biodiversity framework. IUCN also has an observer status with the United Nations General Assembly, and the advantage of this, different nations, they speak in respect of their interests, which are confined to the national boundaries, but the voice of the environment, it is common to all. So when all other nations speak, the IUCN representative in the General Assembly, then he can speak about the global environment concerns. So that a very, very important role IUCN plays. And the present IUCN strength lies in more than 15,000 IUCN Commission members across the 6 IUCN commissions and more than 1,100 institutional members. It is a unique hybrid type of network organization in which the national governments are also members. We have a civil society organizations are also members, and specialist institutional members are also there. So now we are facing the challenge of the COVID crisis, and the COVID has taught us a lot of learnings which we need to take off further, because everything has come to a standstill. Now this is the time we need to look how we want to see our future, how we want to see our cities, how we want to develop further, what meaning should be given to the development. Now when we talk of the tourism sector, especially the tourism is one of the largest sector which provide the livelihoods, and it has become really very challenging now that how to sustain the tourism activities, because now with the implementation of social distancing and other type of norms, so tourism industry also have to rise to the occasion and redefine that how the tourism should develop, how we need to take care of the carrying capacity and all. When coming to the further topic of today's thing, with the nature economics and the tourism sector, because when we talk of the tourism related contribution to the GDP, we only talk of you can say various type of economic factors that include tourist footfall and revenue generation in terms of that. But the tourists who visit these places, what is their cultural value, what is the you can say importance of contribution if you value it in terms of the economic terms, and at the same time the surrounding nature, the forests, the seas, the coastal areas, the mountains, which have their own value, and they are never reflected when we calculate the contribution of the tourism in these sectors, and only we think of the tourism industry in terms of the revenue earning by the tour operators, revenue earning by the hotel industries, and these are the factors. And now with the post-COVID challenge, how to sustain the tourism industry, how to ensure that the livelihood which tourism industry generates, it should remain at the same level, taking into account the carrying capacity of our tourist infrastructure, because sometimes we see that most of the tourists at some particular season, maybe New Year or festival season, everybody want to go at the same place at the same time, and that also create lot of congestion. One thing which we are reading now, Shimla people are now getting during the summers drinking water requirement. Otherwise, every year we listen that in Shimla during these months, for the local people, there is a lot of drinking water crisis. So these are the lessons learned. Tourism also has to go together. The local people also have to be provided the livelihood. So how to ensure this balance at the same time? We have to ensure that surrounding forest and the very natural capital which sustains this tourism activity, because if that is degraded, then the entire tourism can also be endangered. It cannot be sustainable. So with these words, I welcome once again to all the eminent panelists and all the attendees. In the meanwhile, all the attendees, if they have any question, they can post these questions in the chat box, and I think when during the course of the discussion, these questions will also be addressed. And further to that, let me also welcome Dr. TP Singh. He is from IUCN Asia Regional Office, Bangkok. And welcome, Dr. TP Singh, sir. And this is the occasion, sir, when IUCN is already advocating, even prior to this COVID thing, for all biodiversity conservation and other climate change related issues, the development of the nature-based solution standards. And somehow with this COVID crisis, it has become more and more relevant, because when we see now in the present context, the surrounding air, the surrounding water, the clean water, clean sky, birds chirping, and the twinkling of the stars in the cities, movement of the wildlife in all these things. And this should be, I think, the baseline. And for this baseline, I think nature-based solution is key to that. And for the tourism sector also, this matters. And with this word, sir, may I request you, sir, because IUCN also taken very good initiatives for business under business and biodiversity program, and has number of other initiatives which are in pipelines. Welcome, sir. You can update from the global and regional perspective of the IUCN, sir.
Thank you very much, Vivek. Thank you very much. And I would like to commend IUCN India, which amongst all the IUCN offices we have in Asia has been very prominently presenting these webinars on various issues which are of topical interest today. So I would like to commend IUCN India, and especially Vivek, for this taking this initiative and bringing together always a panel which is very eminent. And as I can see today, you got such an expert panel that I've decided not to speak anything about tourism, because in front of this panel, I have no idea what tourism is. I would also like before I start, I would also like to thank Balipara Foundation. Balipara Foundation is our IUCN member, and I know that they've also organized several webinars recently. And I was part of one of the webinars, and they were very useful, again, very topical, of very topical interest. And of course, I would also like to welcome all the panelists, as all the participants to this. I saw a number increasing, so I'm sure there'll be a number of participants who will be listening to us. So thank you very much for joining this seminar. Now, as you all know, that this is part of the Leaders for Nature series. So I would just like to say here that Leaders for Nature is an opportunity to bring together private sector and other business houses so that they can also benefit from the role biodiversity can play in terms of mainstreaming their activities, how we can actually work together in building capacity. We learn from businesses, and businesses learn in terms of what we expect from them in terms of mainstreaming biodiversity issues, etc. And based on this, India started this Leaders for Nature program several years back. And based on the learning, we have a similar platform now, which is in existence in Vietnam, In Thailand, supported by Toyota. In Sri Lanka, called Biodiversity Sri Lanka, which is supported by Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, and in 3 or 4 countries. So based on the success we saw from India Leaders for Nature, it has been now replicated in other countries. I would also like to say that, as Vivek said, IUCN was established in 1948. At that point of time, IUCN was known as International Union for Protection of Nature, IUPN. And we've moved a long way since then to become an organization which not only provides a neutral platform where we can get the government and civil society and others to come together, but also to work very closely with private sector, because we believe that private sector has to be involved in any change process. And especially when we are looking at issues on biodiversity, we have to really make sure that the private sector is our partner. Now, as I said, you all are experts, so I will not speak about tourism, but just to say that tourism and biodiversity are very intimately linked together. And I think that is the common thread which is binding us here, and we are having this discussion, because we know that biodiversity and ecosystems, they provide the base on which this whole tourism activity is established, especially nature tourism. Maybe not Shimla so far, but so much, but nature tourism certainly. And we also know that tourism has the potential of creating jobs, of creating value chains which are useful for us in the long run when we wish to basically make sure that tourism is sustainable. So all these aspects of tourism, which I'm sure you will discuss, are very important. I will finally like to say that, many of us are wondering when will we get our life back after COVID? So people are now looking at how will we go back to the so-called normal. And I would only like to say that we would need to ask ourselves that can we use this opportunity to learn from the mistakes we made and basically build something which is better than what was before. As Vivek has said, you can see wildlife in the cities and better air quality, etc. But the fact is that how do we learn from this, and how does tourism sector now learn from the mistakes that we made to make sure that we have a much better tourism sector, which is much more biodiversity friendly in the future. So these words, I would say that nature has to be part of the solution. So keeping that in mind, I would once again, from Asia Regional Office here, I would like to welcome all the panelists and the participants. And I look forward to listening to the interesting insights which the panelists are going to provide to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and for giving and sharing the views from the IUCN perspective also. So you can continue on the screen because Bharti will be joining through audio only. So
okay,
no
I was just switch off. So okay, thanks.
Yeah. So with these words, now I hand over to Mr. Prabir to take it further and moderate the session, introducing in detail all the panelists. Over to Mr. Prabir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saxena, Dr. Singh, and Balipara Foundation is proud to be a network member of IUCN. Just to put the whole thing in context, I think before I introduce the panelists to the viewers, the entire theme today resonates around 2 words. One is naturenomics and one is conservation. So I thought for a common understanding, let me just broad base these 2 words and define it to take this discussion forward. I will start with naturenomics. Naturenomics is a word that has been coined and registered by Balipara Foundation. And it's a very simple definition of the interdependence between nature and economics, in the sense that you do not have to destroy one to gain the other. When we talk about nature, we must realize that we are very much a part of nature. I'm saying at the end of the day, What the tree exhales is what we inhale. So every breath we take is because of nature. The houses we live in is all, every single material that is used is in some form or the other derived from nature. The cars that we drive, your fossil fuels are derived from nature. And even the basics of your allopathic medicines, which we keep popping, is derived from nature. And yet some of us very often believe that we are separated from nature. And it's a we versus them kind of a syndrome. And let's be very clear, the universe and the natural world is not punishing the human being. It's just responding to our, what Bittu Saigal calls the one I and the three A's. Our ignorance, our apathy, our arrogance, and our avarice. So fundamentally, naturenomics is a pillar of our triangle of three pillars. There is environment, there is economy, and obviously overriding our people and communities. So that is what naturenomics is. Second word is conservation, which is very often misquoted like sustainability. Because when people talk conservation, the only thing that comes to people's mind usually is wildlife conservation. But no, for the purposes of this discussion and for the purposes of our common understanding, conservation is the conservation of the entire body of our environmental inheritance and our cultural heritage, which is all things, living things, biotic, all life-sustaining things which are abiotic, which is culture, tradition, and heritage of people and of communities. So after putting this into context about what we believe is naturenomics and what we think should be the understanding of conservation, let me quickly introduce my fellow panelists to you. I will start with Dr. Saxena, though he doesn't need any introduction. But basically, Dr. Saxena has been a custodian of the forest for about 30 years. He holds a doctoral degree in climate change and agroforestry and a postgraduate diploma in environmental law. He started his career with the Indian Forest Service, and apart from representing many, many world bodies, he has also been in the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India as Director of Deputy Inspector General of Forests, and Private Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Forests. And it is his role here to guide us through the policy and advocacy that is required to take forward, I think, the combined ethos of what Dr. Singh was talking about, and I hope what all our panelists will talk about. And by the way, Dr. Singh and Dr. Saxena, I must compliment IUCN and IUCN India and Ishwar and Anchal for actually making this a panel with equal gender representation. Because very often it is more a panel than a panel with only men folk. Thank you very much for that consideration. I'm doing it the other way around. I'll first introduce the men folk and then move to the wonderful ladies that we have here. Then we have Mr. Raj Basu, better known as the Gandhi of tourism in India. Raj started health tourism, the first conservation-based tourism model, in 1991, and then started the Association for Conservation and Tourism, acronymed as ACT, in 2001. He is presently the advisor tourism to the government of Sikkim, advisor of rural tourism and homestays to the government of Arunachal Pradesh. He has been engaged in eco-tourism policy frameworks for the Kingdom of Bhutan. He closely works on cross-border relations to tourism for more than 2 decades. Secretary General of the Indo-Myanmar Fraternal Alliance, Secretary General of the Indo-Bhutan Friendship Association, beginning to pant, organizer of 4 Indo-Nepal Friendship Meet events with tourism as the main theme. He has initiated the Asian Rural Tourism Festival in Nepal near the Indian border. He has been continuing which has been continuing for the last 5 years. He's initiated the Pangsao Pass Winter Festival at Nongpo in Arunachal Pradesh near the Myanmar border. He has initiated the protection of Paharpur, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in northern Bangladesh near the Indian border, by creating Paharpur Bandhus. And as a founder of health tourism, he has initiated very innovative conservation programs which needs a mention. For example, poachers to tourism, illegal felling to tourism, terrorism to tourism, communities in bird hunting, in communities in tourism, motivation of youth in conservation through ecotourism, and the list actually goes on and on and on. Raj has been also instrumental in setting up and facilitating setting up of more than 3,500 rural homestays in the areas where actually, coincidentally, Balipara Foundation also works in, which is from the snow line, which is the east of Nepal, to the sea line, which is up to Myanmar. He has received incredible number of awards. I think the biggest accolade he's got is the best adventure travel company on earth by National Geographic, Wild Asia Responsible Tourism, subsequently, Toft Awards, Sanctuary Awards, and he has been also called by the guru of, invited by the guru of responsible tourism, Harold Goodwin, I think is his name, to actually present his papers in the UK, in Germany, and in various parts of the world, including Singapore. So Raj, we are looking at some incredible insights of your journey so far and what you actually believe the way forward is. And thank you for being here. Husna-Tara, Prakash. She grew up between the UK and India, and she's probably one of the few people in the world who have studied both in Oxford and Cambridge, where she graduated from in natural sciences. Husna, after getting married, got inspired by the tea plantation and nature tourism initiatives in Kerala, and with her husband Anshuman, decided to open up Glenburn Tea Estates Bara Bungalow, which is the bungalow that the colonial Bara Sahibs used to live in, for a tourism venture. Within 5 years, she was awarded the accolade of among being the 101 best hotels in the world. This year, Glenburn has won the award for being the most responsible hotel in the country. Husna has worked very, very closely with the local communities, with the local environment, but she hasn't stopped there because of her attachment to the culture and heritage of any place that she belongs to. She has actually translated her entire experience to a city like Kolkata, where she's opened up a Glenburn boutique hotel and has actually created the Kolkata walks, which take visitors and tourists through the culture and tradition of unknown or little known facets of this incredible city, but which have been rooted in the history of Bengal. Thank you, Husna. Thank you very much for being here. We have with us Shoba. I can't see Shoba. Shoba, are you there?
I'm there, but there's something wrong with the video. I'm unable to log on to the video. So you'll have to.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can. You can hear me. I can
Okay.
see all of you. I'll keep trying, Prabir.
Okay. Okay. Right. Shoba is actually a zoologist, by education, but she got into the tourism trade, and she realized after a while that she is not suited for the glitz and glamour of conventional tourism. She believes in sustainable tourism. She believes in tourism that provides economic and social mobility for the local communities. She believes in tourism that provides for the protection of biodiversity. She believes in the tourism that actually, what do I say? Actually respects nature and environment. So she's the founder partner of an organization called Rare India, which promotes only what she believes are responsible tourist destinations. She started small with just one property. Today, she represents more than 50 properties in the entire Eastern Himalayan region, apart from other parts of the country, including Nepal and Bhutan. Thank you very much, Shoba, for being here. And then finally, we have all the way from Canada. Good morning to you, Bharti. Bharti Chaturvedi.
Good morning. I'm only here because I'm locked down. I'm actually from Delhi.
Yeah, okay. Bharti comes with a master's degree in history from Delhi University and a master's in international public policy from the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University. She's a Leadership in Environmental Development LEA Fellow and has previously received the Sarai Urban Fellowship. She serves on the board of various non-profit organizations, and she's the co-founder of the Chintan Environmental Research Group, and I'm sure she'll tell us more about that later. So thank you all again. I would just like to start off with one general.
Thank you, Mr. Prabir. Let me correct him again, because while introducing, I did not give your full introduction. So that's about it. So let me introduce our moderator for this webinar session today, Mr. Prabir Banerjea. Having worked with the multinationals for over 2 decades, Prabir embarked on a new journey in 2005 to work on conservation and social restoration projects, and co-founded an NGO called Balipara Foundation, which headquartered in Assam, and co-created the term NaturenomicsTM. He has been part of the team that we started with just 3 members and has now grown to 100, including PhDs and a subject matter experts in the areas of environmental and ecological assessment and management. Being a tree planter's son as also his senior partner, he also felt it was payback time to the environment and people from the tree tribe and other ethnic communities for the incredibly happy childhood he had experienced, and thus was born Wild Mahashir, the heritage homestay social restoration project for the tea tribe community, followed by rural homestay projects among 5 other ethnic tribal communities of the region, directly impacting livelihoods and societal status of over 500 households. Following the principle of naturenomics, which is certainly a new term and which is also a need for today's consideration in the present day context and for the future also, the Wild Mahashir property developed for experimental and mindful tourism now resides within a curated 22-acre Eastern Himalayan botanic arc, orchidariums, bamboo-setums, a seed museum, a nursery with over 1 lakh saplings, and a naturenomics school that imparts knowledge on the ecosystem services that nature provides. In spite of a fully homegrown and in-house trained staff, Wild Mahashir has been recognized by Walk magazine as being among the top 10 nature destinations in India, and has till date hosted over 14,000 guests from 42 countries. So very, very good initiative and great achievement. And once again, now handing over to Mr. Prabir to take it further.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saxena. I'm just going to launch a simple question for people to understand the kind of work and initiatives you have done, and you keep doing, and you will keep doing, I'm sure. If you could just share with us your journey and how you've actually integrated the principles of naturenomics and conservation in doing whatever you've done. Not only how have you integrated that in your vision, but in your strategy, and most importantly, in the execution of your projects. So I would actually like to start with Bharti, because it's really early for her. So maybe Bharti can regale her with her insights, and then maybe if she wants to go back to rest. Bharti, over to you, please. Just as a matter of admin protocol, I think about 12 to 15 minutes would be great per person, and I would urge you to stick to your time. We will follow that with a quick round of questions, and then open it up to questions of the house. Thank you so much, and over to you, Bharti.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me properly though?
Well, I can, yes.
Great. Can everybody else also hear me? Or lovely. So I'm apologetic that I said I would speak earlier, only because there's a little problem with the internet, and it conks out quite fast, and it tends to conk out in the peak of the day, which will happen soon. So I won't even take that long, because there's no presentation I'm able to share. I was kind of under the impression that I would be able to from my phone share a screen and all, but doesn't matter. I'll be so I think what might be interesting to us briefly, and I'm because I'm in the midst of an audience, or rather a panel, co-panelists with way more insight and depth and experience. And Chintan, on the other hand, works really on circular economy issues. And our whole focus is how do you protect the planet, whether you look at air pollution or materials, and how do you kind of use those to either create jobs or fight poverty. Both of these things are quite germane to the work that we do around environment, and our main work has really been around air pollution and waste, but the work around waste is now moving to the whole circular economy work. And so I think so thinking on my feet, because there's no presentation, I think what I was going to talk about, and I'll summarize it, was really looking at two contrasting sites in Uttaranchal that we were working on, and what were the kinds of insights that we got, and how these changed as we began working. So we really began. We started working we started working in two areas. One of them is the Dichori area, just not very far from Corbett actually, and the other is the Dhanolti. Now both of these are popular, and the Dhanolti is very popular. It's almost 2 lakh people, in a year. So that kind of makes it, that kind of is almost overwhelming, I would say. And our mandate, we were working with the Forest Resource Management Project, which is funded, this part of it is funded by JICA. And the mandate and why someone like Chintan had come in was they um, they began to look at, they said every place gets really trashed, and what do we do about it? And we do all these cleaning drives, लेकिन फिर 1 महीने बाद फिर से खराब हो जाता है, it gets dirty after a month. Chintan's perspective is always long-term institutional change, landscape level change. So we did 2 or 3 things. So I'll talk about Dhanolti first. What we did with Dhanolti is we worked with both the panchayat, obviously the forest department, but the Vyapar Mandal, because they were actually farmers who'd set up their shops, and they were, they were actually basically had moved almost completely to depending on tourism. And in a nutshell, what we did was we set up a doorstep collection, and we charged for those services, and there were local people who were hired and trained, but we got somebody from outside whom we trained first quite intensively to manage the project. And when we started doorstep collection, we did segregation. Our focus was reduce all the waste at the doorstep, which means that can you compost? And we got almost, I think, 50 composters, and the smallest of hotels, even with 3 kilos a day in peak period, were managing to compost. And it worked quite well even when it was fairly cold. But we were also really interested in looking at how do you reduce these plastics, because what was happening was that in places like this, which people in large cities often forget, that you can have like a piece of iron and that might not be recyclable because of the cost of retrieving it from distant locations, and the complete loss of complete the way it works. So we used two strategies which are actually quite intuitive, which was that we would just try and reduce the plastics. And that's not a new thing, but the point is how do you do it when there's very limited budgets, when the tourism is not completely, people with, it's a modest kind of tourist place. So we replaced a lot of cutlery, a lot of single-use plastics, did all this composting. And the idea really was that who will ever come to, why would, one of the problems with plastics is that whatever you do, it was getting into the forest land and into the farms below that, through rainwater, etc. And the problem with that is that if you are going to allow this to happen, the plastics, we all have got those WhatsApps that say, well, here all these plastics will take 600 years to decompose or whatever. But that's quite a fallacy, because it doesn't, decomposition is not relevant to us anymore. What is relevant to us is that this becomes microplastics, which are smaller than 5 millimeters, and this causes a huge impact on nature. And this includes, pretty irreversible metabolic damage in, whether you're looking at fish, or whether you're looking at, well, there's lots more work that's been done on molluscans and, lower order creatures. And it's totally irreversible. It does come to haunt us. There's been so much plastic found in honey, for example, microplastic. But the real point is that you have to that we try to combine leakage into ecosystem with solutions that would finally be able to stand on their own, so to say. We've got thoroughly disrupted by COVID because, and I'll explain from the other case study what could have happened next. But where we are right now is, obviously the idea was to expand to several villages in the month of April, so everything was ready. And the idea was really, how do you create a landscape? Because you can't just do one area and another area. The idea is to create an area that can teach other areas, and you yourself can hopefully stop having to be present there all the time, having embedded resources as well as micro entrepreneurs, as well as demonstrable change. And of course, so in the other circuit, which is about 10, 12 villages, we obviously, it's quite different, and it's not so tourism heavy in this way or so concentrated. We set up we found that a lot of people had forgotten what they used to do just 10 years ago, 8 years ago, which was, and I personally, just to, for an aside, I actually am an obsessive birder. And so I tend to go to a lot of places anyway because of birding. And I had some familiarity with these landscapes. I know the Eastern Himalayas are I mean, some of the world's best places. Even that one, thanks to COVID, plans have gone. But what we were trying to do was, in this circuit, we helped people go back to feeding cows with wet waste, which is something that seems to be, for some inexplicable reason, have somehow ceased to happen a lot. So we did that, and we obviously collected plastics, and we were working on implementing a law called the Extended Producer Responsibility, mandatory under the plastic waste and the solid waste rules, where basically the brand manufacturer has to pay for disposal. And so while we've managed to get all that, I think that part of the work, it has taken a hit, because there is no way that any company, and globally we're finding as that companies are saying, excuse us for a year or so till the economic hit is less, and only then will we try to be environmentally responsible. And I think it's quite important for even IUCN to take note of these policy shifts, which can have negative impact on nature and the environment. But that was, so right now we're just storing it and trying to recycle most of it. More importantly, we worked with a lot of the women, and we looked at replacements, because what we do everywhere is a waste audit to begin with. So it's not that you see the same waste in every area. I mean, if you look at Agra, I'm just saying Agra because it's also a place with a lot of tourism and a local population, which receives a lot of attention, and we just have been working there with UNEP. The waste is a completely different order from tourism, obviously, but even the plastics that are discarded are quite different vis-a-vis these other places, chemically and even brand-wise, obviously. So what we tried to do is we identified the top culprits, and biscuits turned out to be a huge culprit. And we found that styrofoam plates were another big issue, because of festivals and mundans and mandir pe events and so on, which was an internal issue. So basically we worked with the women, and we obviously taught them how to bake low cost cookies and things like that. And one of them even set up her tea shop, and there was linkages made to sell them ahead, all of which obviously have taken a hit now, because we were going to push it very hard in March, so that they would learn how to sell, how to meet demand, and really establish long-term linkages by November again. Be that as it may, we'd also spoken for the novelty to these naan katai makers, because these are cookies they sold to you in kagaz ke thele, and these create employment to people. And we said, well, we'd found the business plan, and we were going to ask them to come up throughout the summer as part of this project. And they were quite excited because they were all anyway from Dehradun, and said, try and we will pay you initially, because we also need to capture the data on how popular you are and who can afford you, and and get that data to feed into the wider plan. But let's do naan katais. It's made in a kadhai, which is a very large wok for anyone who doesn't know, and it doesn't use any. There's very little waste. I mean, there's the waste of one paper envelope, and so we did that part. And then obviously we had to set up these bartan bhandars, which are just steel plates and glasses and spoons and all of that, to counter the other kind of waste that was coming out. And that was very popular because it was run by a combination in some places by the more dominant women's self-help groups, but in other areas by other kinds of actors. There's a mandir that's very active and also a culprit for some of this. And so basically playing on local leadership, and um, in basically anchoring all kinds of solutions that they can take forward, like in Dhanolti, to go back to Dhanolti, because the money that was collected from each shop does not 100% pay for the cost of the two people and the petrol and the running costs. The panchayat and the Vyapar Mandal, and us and the forest department had come up with the idea of charging some kind of a green cess, so that we could keep this going, because we were hoping to get out of this project basically early next year and phase out. So that was another plan, but now I don't know where that will go, whether our presence will be extended or not, and how long it will take to limp back. But essentially, in a nutshell, and we've diverted, say, about, from the Dichori circuit, about 2 tons annually, which isn't a lot. I'm only talking plastics, but it isn't a lot weight-wise, but it's a lot contamination-wise, uh, particularly because wastes like styrofoam actually are extremely difficult to remove once they get into the ecosystem. And from the Nolty, we would have done diverted, which doesn't include all the composting, would be well over 5-6 tons a year. After we replaced all the plastics, not all, obviously some. So that is where this stands, and why I was giving you these 2 case studies. I hope my time's not over, but the reason I was sharing these 2 case studies was really talking about what kind of naturenomics is possible. There's local livelihoods, which all of you more have done much more than Chintan will ever do, I'm sure. But there's also the importance that we think is that you can't just go and set up systems that don't in some way create local economic, financial and livelihood incentives. And what I'll do is I'll stop here, because I think I have actually touched about nearly 10 minutes.
No, thank you very much, Bharti. I'm saying this really resonates with me, and I'm sure with all my entire team in Balipara Foundation, because you're actually looking at community upliftment through what we call the value chain of what we call LEWAC, which is land, energy, waste, water, which leads to cleaner air and lower carbon emissions. So thank you very much for sharing this with us. And please don't be so disheartened and pessimistic. I'm sure your projects will jump back and leapfrog back once this
I'm not
nature lets
disheartened or
us.
pessimistic, but I do want to be realistic, because you know because you want to close your role and experiment with what will happen after you. So that's all that there is.
But thank you very much for being here and taking the trouble early in the morning, and have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We will now move on to tourism, and we will move to the hills of the Eastern Himalayas with a practitioner, and a successful practitioner, and a responsible practitioner, Husna-Tara, and a Glenburn story. Husna, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Prabir. That was very inspiring to hear from Bharti about waste projects, because to me that is one of the main things that everyone really has to focus about, because getting rid of waste, even if one wants to, can be extremely challenging. And sometimes in the remotest areas, it's hardest to get rid of that plastic, and it's hardest to convince people that, you know, they can do away with using so much plastic even in their rural lives. And I think it's something that's incredibly important. So that was very inspiring. So talking about Glenburn, I stumbled into tourism 22 years ago when I married into a tea planting family and found myself living on a tea estate. And the story really grew from there. It was me being placed in an environment that I didn't know very much about. I learned about the community and the workings of the tea estate, and found that the whole process and the people and that human touch that goes into making a cup of tea is something really incredible. And you know, tea is one of the beverages that is drunk the most after water. I think 1.5 billion cups of tea are drunk every day. 25,000 cups every second are being drunk around the world. And for people to not really know about where that product comes from and the kind of community that is attached to that was something, you know, that was a real eye-opener to me. So when the first 2 years of our marriage, we were on a tea estate in Kerala. And in 1999, things were really opening up in Kerala with tourism, and they were becoming very successful in the whole God's own country Ayurvedic sort of model, that we started thinking about doing something on that estate, modeling it on the vineyards of Europe and Australia and the Napa Valley, where people were invited in to learn about the whole wine culture experience. And then we happened to sell that tea garden, and Glenburn came into our hands. And when we went up to Glenburn and saw this incredible 1,600-acre private estate with 1,000 acres of private forest, 2 rivers, you looked up to Mount Kanchenjunga, the 3rd highest mountain in the world. And who were the guardians of this incredible piece of nature? It was the community. It was the local people that lived within Glenburn. There were 1,000 workers and their families that had lived there for generations. This community was brought in from Nepal by the British in the early 1800s, when they were the British East India Company was gifted this part of the country by the King of Sikkim. And there was no local sort of community there to grow the tea and to pick it and to start this tea tradition. And so they brought communities over from neighboring Nepal, and these people settled in the region. And today it's these 4th, 5th generation families that are the guardians and the custodians of this incredible land. And today, Darjeeling tea is certified as a geographical index. There are only 87 tea estates that can produce Darjeeling tea. And about 3 or 4 times that amount is sold in the world. So there's a lot of sort of fake Darjeeling tea that is being sold. And that's making the viability of this region very precarious at the moment. There are very few tea estates in Darjeeling that could really be called viable at the moment, because the cost of production has gone so high, mainly based on the labor that are required to support the workers in the community that are required to support this industry. And nobody's paying very much for that cup of amazing Darjeeling tea. And the difference between Darjeeling tea and Assam tea or other types of tea is that it's very small quantities and very high value. So if the price isn't realized for that very high value cup of tea, you don't make enough of it to really be viable. So when we started the hotel, it was very much an experiment. I was a science teacher by profession. I had no concept or idea of, you know, what I could do with the tourism model, but it just happened so naturally because the place lent itself to this magical experience that the very initial visitors that we had that came to Glenburn, we started off by making a small promotional video just to market the tea, to market Darjeeling tea. And the people that came there, we were very lucky to have Tom Alter, the wonderful personality from Missouri who sadly passed away recently, to come and star in the film because he had a family connection with the Woodstock School alumni in the family. And he was just blown away. He said, people should be coming to visit this place. So we said, okay, let's try. So we started with 4 rooms in the Borough Bungalow, and I met a very dynamic lady called Ronwan Latif in Delhi that same summer who offered to come out and help me. And it was the community that helped us sort of create this experience. And then when I brought people to see it, they loved what we were doing. And that's why very easily, within a couple of years, we were included in the best 101 hotels of the world by the Tatler Travel Guide, which is an international magazine. But this was very much a surprise to us. We never expected this to happen. We didn't have a vision. We didn't have a plan, right? And this happened because of the people that helped us make this happen on the ground. So we now have 55 staff that look after 16 guests. We only have 8 rooms, and people still laugh at me when I say that I have an 8-room hotel, right? But the guests who come and stay with us have access to 1,600 acres of private estate and are looked after by 55 members of the local community who have now been trained, and very easily trained. I didn't have to work very hard with them as service people, as housekeepers, as drivers, as gardeners, as security guards, as birding guides. We currently have a golden mahseer program down by the river where we're trying to conserve the golden mahseer. So it was so easy to use what we already had on the estate to create this economic model that I can now see is defined beautifully by Prabir's concept of naturenomics, where you use what you have already, you use the local community, and you create a model that can sustain the tea estate. And today, Glenburn is still alive because of this tourism model. And hopefully it will continue to be able to support the tea estate and allow this to flourish even further. And what we're doing in the river this year with protecting the golden mahseer is just an extension of the conservation that we are being able to practice because of the economic model of the tea estate. And I've just realized that I was supposed to share my screen to show you some photographs. Would you like me to still do that, Prabir? That screen share has.
Why not?
Yeah, is that I can't see that button anymore, but let's see.
Yeah, Anchal has to help you. Yeah.
I think it's there. Okay. So. Can you all see it? Can you see my screen?
Yes, Husna,
Yes.
we can see your screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this is the
But
experience.
it's not on. It's not on. Yeah. Now we can. Now it's. Yeah.
It might lag a little bit, so if my voice doesn't match the slides, just bear with me. But I'll just take you very quickly through the fact that, over 22 years, we've had all this international press. How could that have happened in a remote tea estate where the only people we employ are local villagers, right? It just goes to show that if you trust the local community, if you believe in what they can do, you can create a world-class product. And this is where going back to nature, going back to the local communities, not trying to fly in fancy chefs and fancy ingredients, and just celebrating the natural heritage and the local environment can actually create something that is incredibly viable. So these are the 87 tea estates. That's Glenburn up in the top right-hand corner, and these white patches are the private forest, the 2 rivers that run through it, and we're on the border of Sikkim. So we are blessed with this incredible landscape, which you can see in some of these slides. These are just a very quick sort of show of what we've done, but I wanted to focus on the food, the eating experience, the local kind of produce that we try and bring into our menus. We grow a lot of it, and what it's done to the tea plantation itself, the 1,000 workers and their families that live within the estate are really the people that bring this alive to people. And nobody really realized that so much went into their cup of tea until they came to us. And now more and more people are visiting and realizing that the human face behind a cup of tea is something that really needs to be valued. And that story of tea. This is 1,000 acres of forest. We have a log cabin by the river. This is where we're developing the mahseer program. And there's a footbridge into Sikkim, there are village walks, bamboo forests, so incredible biodiversity, incredible amounts of sort of space that and flora and fauna that we're trying to sort of preserve through this. And these are my local gardeners that are now bird watching guides, and some of them have now mastered English beautifully, and others just speak in their little broken Nepali, come Hindi, come English, but they are able to translate what they need to do. And the local community is so much a part of the experience. We have an education program as well. So the success of the tourism has allowed us to start a Glenburn Estate Foundation that looks after 3 local primary schools and also sponsors the fees of 64 children to go to private schools. We have a music and dance academy where we celebrate Nepali heritage and culture and help these children learn about their heritage and their traditions. And once a year, we have an annual festival. We have cooking demonstrations where they teach our guests how to make traditional momos and things like that. And it's all thanks to them. So this year, when we won the Responsible Tourism Award for the most responsible hotel, it was something that was dedicated to the community work that we've been doing. And just to touch on what we've taken to Calcutta, I started exploring Calcutta only when my guests from Glenburn asked me to show them the city. And we started this hotel just 2 years ago. But before that, almost 12 years ago, I had started historical, cultural, and gastronomy walks through the city that eventually became not just a walk, but actually a 3-day excursion under the skin of the city. And I've just taken a few slides of the more colonial and building aspects, but I want to focus on the goats of the city, the herdsmen that come across to the Maidan every morning, the flower markets, the people over here that will happily offer a lotus flower to my guests, or the street food in these beautiful buildings surrounded by Dutch ceramic tiles that were brought over here in the 19th century. The people of Calcutta have this interest and this sort of passion that you won't find in other cities. And this is the heritage of the city that is often forgotten. Who would have thought that you can sort of help a livelihood by taking a walk through a fruit market or a flower market and interacting with these people and hearing their stories and joking about what they think of Brexit or Donald Trump or the street food. It's something that is so easy to do, but not often people will think about it. And we've been very blessed with an amazing following of international guests over the years. And now with the situation where we don't have international guests, I'm really looking forward to opening up these experiences to our domestic clients from within India, teaching them that their children can live without television on the tea estate, that it's okay to have them walk 3 hours down to the river. They will survive and they'll probably be better kids for it. That we can walk them through a potter's market and teach them about how these beautiful idols for Durga Puja are made from just clay and straw, and a community that has been doing this for generations. Amongst many others. So, that was a very brief glimpse of what we've managed to do, but it's all about people. It's all about the local environment, be it a cityscape in Calcutta or a beautiful expanse of forest up in Glenburn. But as Prabir very cleverly said, it's the triangle. It's the ecology, the community, and the economics. If the economics didn't work, we wouldn't be able to do this. But over 20 years, I have shown that the economics can work. And so this beautiful phrase called economics is something that I think should be really commended and taken forward into the future of tourism. And it'll help us all, the planet, as well as our children, and we'll all be better for it as a race. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Husna. That was really fascinating. And well, all I can say is you're a true caregiver, and I wish you and your communities many, many years of happiness, joy, and bliss. I've got a question, but I'll come back to that later. I've got a question on what you believe or what you think is the ethos of responsible tourism, responsible in quotes, but we'll tackle that later. Now let's move from a practitioner to an evangelist, to my friend Shoba, who's also got a new crown on her head because she's a COVID survivor. So Shoba,
Yes.
Shoba, your experience of setting up RARE and promoting what you believe are caring destinations for the caring and experiential tourist, a little insight from you will really help, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabir, and thank you for calling me a COVID survivor. I actually breezed through it. I was thankful that we didn't get one of the more serious ones, but thank you for that. I mean, everything that I have learned through what I've done has been ably summed up by Husna, and it's just, I think, a great twist of fabulous fate that I entered when I entered the industry. The first hotel that came on board literally laid the blueprint for what I would be doing under Air India for the next 15 years, 15, 16 years now. The whole idea was, I'm like the typical bank teller, a lot of money passing through me, but none of the money is mine. So none of these lovely hotels and retreats and lodges that we market under Air India are mine. But I have each one of them with their ideas and attitudes, all of them centering around conservation, community, planet, and also transformations now. All this became a part of the narratives that we went out to the market with. Earlier, we were a very B2B kind of a marketing. We were very B2B going forward, especially in the last 2-3 years when conservation is becoming a part, conservation, community, the very essence of tourism and who is the ultimate beneficiary of tourism. That is becoming clearer and clearer to people. Properties such as Husna's, Glenburn, Wild Mahase, Tiger Mountain, Saraya Toria, and the 53 brands that we market under there. This is coming up more and more, and it is no longer a choice that can be easily put aside. And all that we needed to do is take these wonderful stories to people and keep encouraging them with knowledge, with stories, with success stories, and help the market, help the travel industry understand not only why these are value propositions, but also to understand how they can transform an industry which today is a good, these 3 months of COVID disruption is a great time to understand why tourism has to step up to the next level. And this is what primarily we've achieved in the last 15 years. Like I'm fond of saying, aiming for collective behavioral change, which we began with. First, I began with changing myself. Despite coming from a small town, despite being a part of a lot of interesting things as I was growing up, also a very traditional upbringing, being a science student, a lot of what Husna and Prabir promote and also endorse as a part of their properties is also something that continued to inspire me, and every day is a learning process. And this is, I think, for me, is one way to aim for behavioral change in the way travelers explore their choices, right? So which means instead of wanting, this is a picture from Kipling camp in Kana, that's Belinda with Tara. The whole narrative about how the community is involved, how there's an elephant on site, how the entire focus is on mitigating man-animal conflict by basically getting travelers and tourists to understand and fall in love with the jungles, and understand that every tourism and hospitality project is its primary aim to ensure that the destination is pristine, and it maintains its integrity, while the final beneficiaries of a tourism product has to be the community that is in these host destinations. Of course, the product then becomes the center of attraction. You had a look at, I think Prabir will also show you Wild Mahasir, and you saw what Husna put out as a product. So the product is the center of attraction, but the everything, all the service, the way the product is built, which is inspired from the local heritage, or from the by the vernacular architecture around, or from the habitat, I mean, from the biodiversity of the region. So all these products become the center of attention, but it aims to focus your attention to the property and the experience that you're going to offer. Then human interest stories become very, very important. A simple image like this, and what Rare does is, and what we've been trying to do and what we've achieved so far, is to use powerful narratives to kind of keep directing tour operators and travelers to this beauty of tourism that works on these. I mean, I didn't know that there was this a triple bottom line, and you know, each one of my hotel can talk about a triple bottom line in a very, very different. I mean, for instance, Husna said ecology, economy, and community. And you know, at the end of the day, the triple bottom lines for each of them always you know, focuses on these. It's about the environment, it's about the community, it's also about transformations, because like I said, you know, the hoteliers that we market are agents of change, not only within the community. They're also agents of change, that as we keep talking about these people, as each one of them, I mean, garbage is an issue. How do they conserve water? What do they do with their wastewater? All these are fantastic stories, not only for the community within ourselves to get inspired and start adopting in our own hotels. It is also inspiration for other hoteliers, other boutique hotels all over the country. Yesterday, I was talking to a hotelier, and she runs this lovely place in Kur. Just to hear this word, that we are a zero waste retreat, is like music to my ears. I mean, you know, it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of training to be sitting in a position like that. Then we kind of build the community. So one by one, Husna has been one of the, you know, one of the first people, one of the first 10 hotels to come on board, by building the community, by getting them to share things, and also by getting, you know, as a community, tour operators or travelers, once they look at Husna's property and they see that it's a part of this community, they automatically know that each and every hotel endorses these common ideas and principles. We've been promoting this in various ways. We've been promoting sustainable luxury. I mean, when we put this idea out, conscious luxury travel is future ready, there was a little you know, pushback to say, why are you saying conscious and luxury? But it is a luxury. I mean, today, and it's just that we would like to define luxury very differently. For somebody else, a mile-long buffet, you want to talk about a mile-long buffet as luxury. For us, farm to table, fresh food and local ingredients are a luxury in itself. So, which is why we kind of went with the word luxury. We started calling it conscious luxury, because we believe once you're conscious about this, once a traveler is conscious about what the impact of his travel is going to be, or is on the environment and the host destination, he cannot but take the gentler choices. He cannot but look at opportunities that will only help the local community and also promote what he believes is a very, very sustainable choice where the environment is concerned. We ran this wonderful campaign last year. This is called Earth Ka Kuch Karo Warna Anarth Ho Jayega. A very, very powerful statement by this young girl called Agrani Gupta, and it kind of became a very, very important message out, not only to tour operators who loved it, even if they didn't speak Hindi. When we explained this to them, they really understood it. But also the tour operators and children. I mean, they just took to this whole idea, and it was a very, very successful campaign. So just to tell you how our community works, like I said, we are a community of 53 brands that we market. Some of them have 2 hotels, some of them have standalone hotels, but it is largely focused on the owner, because just like Husna and Prabir, that they lead the idea, they believe what they believe in, they ensure that every person on the property, as the community or as their team members, they are aligned with the idea, whether it's safety and hygiene, given the post-COVID travel conditions just now, or the benchmarks that they have set up for running their properties. These are some of the touchstones we work with. one of the last ones to come in, and you can see that heart shape. This is the human touch, which is empathy for environment, understanding about the community, and also creating transformation experiences, which is only the human touch that can help you understand and follow this. No single-use plastic. We run campaigns. We talk to our hoteliers. I mean, some of them, at least 80% of them come on board with this whole idea that we will not be using plastic. We do not want any plastic, but it is an ongoing work, and we have a sustainability officer who constantly comes up with campaigns, and she runs it for them. Water conservation, how you use your water, where, what do you do with your surface runoff, what do you do with your wastewater, what are the kind of detergents that you use, and where you push your wastewater into. These are some of the ideas that go under the water conservation part. Wildlife and forest conservation, very important. We kind of moved away from ideas that that talked about, manicured lawns and manicured gardens, and started to pitch for wild gardens, started to pitch for rewilding projects, started to pitch for areas where the local, the endemic trees, creepers, shrubs and herbs have come about, and that created a little forest and ecosystem in itself. So that's what we started to talk about. Also trying to highlight, conservation issues, the habitat loss issues, the conflict between humans and between communities and wildlife, which kind of goes on to provide an understanding for travelers who come there to understand what are the pressures on wildlife and national parks around India. Low impact tourism, very simple things like, what is the locational advantage? Do you want to be in a place crowded with 40 other lodges, which creates pressure on the land that you're on the environment, and also on resources? It primarily belongs to the local community. So hotels that even think about this thing and create locations that are slightly remote, that do not impinge upon the local resources. Generous land to key ratios. You heard Husna, 1,600 acres and just about eight keys. So generous land to key ratios again are something that really defines the kind of earth-centeredness you have. What do you do with your garbage? I mean, again, we run campaigns. We work with the Waste Warriors, Meenakshi, who regularly does training programs. She gives insights into training. Our hoteliers even reach out to her, asking her how to do. She kind of worked in the Corbett area and cleaned up over 180 villages all on her own, along with a team of people from the local villages. Local community engagement is very, very high, and this is one of the things that we look for when we are trying to engage, trying to create the community. More than 80% of our hotels have over 80% of their teams from the local communities, creating jobs directly as direct impact, of course, creating jobs indirectly by providing education, medical facilities, health and health benefits. Also indirectly by using local talent. I mean, there are a lot of properties, especially Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and things like that, where women have their women and men have their own talents. I mean, like somebody makes hand patted rotis, they are included in the team, so that guests tend to get to savor local handmade bajra rotis. There are people who women who do the lipais, those that mud plastering. So all these talents are also included, and these I look at it as as also another means of engaging the local community. Also buying locally from the local farmers, involving the local carpenters. Some of them use the local potters to put out room amenities like shampoos and things like that. Targeting two things at the same time. I mean, you don't have plastic and disposable bottles that that create that fill your that go to landfill. The other thing is it creates small opportunities for employment and purchase for the local people. Heritage conservation is again very, very big. A lot of these plantation stays, small forts and palaces, all these, if they were not taken up as hospitality projects, which probably would have crumbled and we would have lost it in the sands of time. That is one of a very, very major part of sustainable travel, of repurposing heritage to use them as hospitality projects. Not only that, intangible cultural heritage. These are things like folk music, cultural, cultural aspects like festivals, crafts that are dying, textiles that are dying away, bringing them and involving and bringing them as activities as explorations around your hotel creates a lot of value for them, and it allows travelers not only to understand them, but also for purchasers can create more interest and ensure that future generations carry on with these craft and textile activities. The last, of course, and there is plenty as we keep talking, as we keep discovering, there are a lot more things added to the legend. But the last is, of course, destination discovery. How do you promote these offbeat places? How do you what is the experience of these destinations that really work with resonate with travelers? So the Naturenomics, the forest that Prabir has created around Wild Mahasir, or the lovely walk that it takes one to the bottom of the hill at Glenburn. These are opportunities for children, for adults to learn, to touch and feel and walk through areas of nature, which I believe is a great way to fall in love with the biodiversity our country has. And it just empowers us and our communities to promote various ideas to allow people to travel these areas. So this is some of our anchor stories. These are all numbered. We've kind of gone back to our community. How many of them are Toft, are affiliated to Toft? How many partners have adopted the no plastic policy? Almost all of them work on local immersion. So these are all things like that. So the idea is to basically get travelers now. And first, the tour operators, of course, there's a lot of knowledge that goes into engaging with them. They are thrilled. I mean, stories really inspire people, and the way we put out our properties with the legends at the bottom basically tells you that these people endorse these touchstones, which are basically the for any responsible travel, for any tourism activity. These are the elements that are required to be to promote yourself as a responsible tourism and a sustainable product. So that's the thing I just want to tell you. You would have seen a leaf floating by. This is the leaf Ginkgo biloba, which is called the maidenhair tree. It has been in existence since the dinosaurs, and it's also called a fossil tree. It has survived the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It originated in the east, and today you can find the Ginkgo biloba available at in every corner of the world. There is one specimen in Manali apparently, and of course, I've seen it as an avenue tree in London. I've seen it in Paris. I've seen it in New York as an avenue tree. The idea is that any idea of conservation, whether you are marketing it or you're promoting it on ground, you're working on the field, but the whole idea of conservation, sustainability, and also earth-centeredness has to be propagated by people, just like the Ginkgo biloba. It moved from one place to the other across the world because it was propagated by human hand. Conservation is like that. Conservation has to be taken up as an ideology. It has to be taken up as a future and has to be spoken about passionately by people, and the travelers are the key to this. Every traveler who comes to a Wild Mahasir or a Glenburn tea estate, he is a transformed individual and takes back stories, takes back ideas that kind of changes his life towards a better and a more environment-friendly world. Thank you, Prabir. That was my presentation.
Thank you. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely overwhelmingly outstanding. Just one thing, we know that community-led, naturenomics-related, conservation-related projects create social, first economic, and therefore social mobility for the local communities. How do we now start creating knowledge mobility beyond the communities? That's something that I'll come back to you. But before we get on to Raj, just to talk about, people, the discovery of new destinations. The history of tourism began when? The history of tourism began with the Roman Empire, where the Roman nobles used to go to what they called nature and revitalizing areas to get away from their city life in those days. The same thing transformed to India as well. But maybe in India, the whole thing of mythology, pilgrimage, and the mystique of waterfalls and caves got added into the whole thing. I think we need to go back to that, and we are going back to that. And while Shoba is actually working on this whole process of transformation and knowledge mobility, I think Raj has already achieved a lot of that. So Raj, over to you, but I'm sorry we started 15 minutes late. I'll give you 10 minutes and then I have a quick round of questions before we close. Over to you, Mr. Gandhi of Tourism.
Thank you, Prabir. Yes, like the others, I do not have a presentation to make because my presentation is on the ground. All you have to do is to visit to see the presentations. And secondly, I'm not a marketing person. I'm basically someone who is part of the movement of conservation and tourism, which is local. So it's all more of field work. So it's good that you gave me less time, 10 minutes, because I do not have much to speak actually. But coming down to what we were just discussing, there is one thing in principle that I believe is conservation and tourism without ownership of local people is impossible. The first thing we have to understand, because I'm so very happy that today IUCN is talking the tourism language, which means there is some relation between the two, which has been proved through these 3 decades that I have been working on the field, and I've seen there was a time when there were 2 opposite poles. They never saw eye to eye. The forest department never believed in tourism. We have the IFS officers over here; they would agree to that. And it took so much of time working on the ground, talking about it, going away from the bureaucratic way of looking into conservation and protection, where we go back to the reserve forest. When we talked about the reserve forest during the industrial movement, it was reserved for what? Was the question. And then gradually we transformed that reserve into the conservation areas or protected areas. Now protected for what? Protected for conservation. So which was already there in our communities, which we forgot. With this small little 200, 300 years of colonial history, we forgot that conservation is a part of our communities living in Asia. I do not know much about the other areas because going around Asia, I've seen that, and by seeing that and doing that, we saw, in spite of all the conservation that we had, we were ruling the earth. We contributed to a civilization, and this civilization, it spread through the rice route, through Chittagong and the other places to the rest of the world, giving them wonderful items, and also through the Silk Route through Tibet that we know of. And this civilization was giving to the people what we now call as trade, as commerce, as marketing, as consumerism, is how we used our terracotta to send our things, how we used our weaving materials to send our things. And we could almost weave everything, from bamboo to cane to cotton to silk. We could weave everything. So these were small inputs from our communities that we gave to the world what the modern civilization sees. And we forgot that. We forgot that glory. And we are sitting on that because all of us who are talking over here, especially Prabir, Husna, and I, all of us, we belong to this region where, the Silk Route is the nearest to the rice route, the maritime. So this is where everything was planned, where everything went out, because biodiversity-wise, this was the best known zone. And this is where, a civilization could happen. And that is where the search started from. And when I thought about tourism, being from the mainstream conservation background, being into wildlife, being a part of that, being into adventure, I found that conservation and tourism, through our actions, we found out that conservation and tourism are 2 sides of a coin. However you toss it, it's winning for both. And if it's not 2 sides of a coin, that means there is something wrong into the entire venture of tourism that we are talking about. So this is where the importance of tourism and conservation lies. And we have realized this, Prabir, we have realized this through the years of practice that we have done all the way from starting from Manas to Sundarbans to Gorumara to all the other places across East Himalaya and the Indo-Burma region. And why this region was more important for us? Because of the entire Hindu Kush Himalayan region that you see about. This entire, what we know as the 3rd pole of the world. When you consider nature, this is the 3rd pole of the world. And this is where, the breeding of the consciousness about conservation started. And this is where we have to go back to. When we are talking about sustainability, when we are talking about the sustainable development goals across the world, what a major mistake we are making by not recognizing our villages back in the northeastern part of India as classrooms of sustainability. Where, for the basics of life, for your food, clothing, and shelter, for all these three basics, you are dependent on your backyard biodiversity. You're not dependent on what you call at the malls or the talks of corporate or anything else. So this is where it matters the most. When you are talking about tea, especially both of you who are here in the panel, when you're talking about tea, we don't talk about the spirituality of tea. We don't talk about the tea that goes back to 5,000, 7,000 years old. We don't talk about the orange that goes back to 5,000 years old. We don't talk about the galas. That is the chicken that we have. We don't the red jungle fowl that gave the mother gene to the rest of the world to come back as KFC. We never talk about this. We never take pride into that. This is where whatever we talk about tourism sometimes goes wrong. Sometimes we start replicating something what comes from a very far away world, the seven seas world it comes from. So we start replicating that, because for us tourism was always there, because if human beings are to live, they need food, they need clothing, they need shelter, and they need to travel. And travel, as you said, as you just mentioned before I spoke, was about also pilgrimages. And that is how we realized how important it was, because for us pilgrimage was not about going to a religious place that we know of today, because that is something what came very recently. But we talked about going back to nature through livelihood. How we explored, how we went into that. Because if you look at pilgrimage, that is where tourism started. Because tourism, when WTTC or UNWTO describe, they often describe it as an economic activity. And this is where the main mistake is. Because when you talk about tourism, it is dependent on four pillars. The four pillars is the traveler, the host, the travel, and the destination. And all of us, if you realize in this panel, has been speaking about it, have been talking about it. So how best we look after them? Often we look into the catchline of tourism, Atithi Devo Bhava. Go to Nepal, we say this. You come to India, we say this. Where we believe that guest is our God. But where does it come from? Where does this philosophy comes from? It comes from the core, when we say Pita Deva Bhava, Mata Deva Bhava, Acharya Deva Bhava, Atithi Deva Bhava. That means if your father is kept well in the place, if your mother is kept well in your place, if your teacher is kept well in your place, then it is a good place to visit. So it is better places to live in and better places to visit. So until and unless it is not a better place to live in for your own people, how can it be a better place to visit? So this is where, when we talk about tourism, this is the change we have to talk about. This is where, we want organizations like IUCN to come up and partner and say that, conservation and tourism are two sides of a coin, because only talking about protection, conservation will not happen the way we have seen, because 200, 300 years, we have lost more of the habitat. Talking about tea alone, how much of the tea habitat have we saved? Because when we talk about tea, we show the beautiful plantations of tea. But do we say that where the tea comes from? Where are those tropical forests from where tea generated? Have we been able to keep at least 60 to 70% of those forests when we are talking about tea? So this is where we have to start realizing from. In the same way, when you talk about tourism, it is about talking about these practices. Because we talk about culture. How have we forgotten the culture of biodiversity? I know naturenomics is something what we have trademarked. We haven't trademarked this terminology known as biodiversity, because often it was known as animist. Animist cannot be the right way to to describe the Asian people over here who live with the forest, who live with nature. The right word could be biodiversity, because we find our divine forces in nature. So this is where we have to start our learning process from. This is where we have to start talking. This is the culture that tourism has to explore and get into more depth. And this is where both tourists and the host community in the travel have to come together and learn this entire process and adopt this religion of biodiversity. Then only we can reach somewhere where we say conservation and tourism are both sides of the coin. So when we look into this, when we do this kind of running, we always try to use tourism, this natural areas, this naturally diverse areas, which we were losing with time due to several reasons. Several, like, logging was closed down because from protected for logging, we were trying to do protected for the purpose of conservation. We created national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. So we were actually not getting into that conservation until and unless the context of tourism ownership was added with the local people, because this is what we have to remember. Because most of the time we think that the big organizations, the corporate organizations, could come, create this tourism and and bring in the change. No, they can only bring about a surface change. They can only talk about the change, but it is the ownership of the people locally which is going to bring the change, because they are the people who are carrying this entire responsibility of biodiversity. When you talk about tribal people, we say tribal people are so attached to nature. Just by the surname, you don't become a tribal. Living in the Northeast, you must have understood that. Because this is where we are going wrong. Through the constitution, we must describe a person who is a tribal, who can live with the biodiversity, who can live with nature, who can live the life of nature. This is exactly where we have to, give the surname of a tribal community. A tribal community, just by a surname, cannot become a tribal if he or she doesn't lead a sustainable lifestyle. So the sustainable lifestyle is something what we have to teach the visitors who are coming here. And we have to send them as tribals. We have to send them back as tribals. So we invite the world through tourism. They come in. Maybe it's a kind of pilgrimage where they find pilgrimage into nature, into this kind of biodiversity. And then we convert them into the religion of biodiversity and say that you are tribals. You can really lead this kind of life. So nothing what we say is a 2 nights package or a 4 nights package or a 5 nights package. These are just introducing the people, the visitors to nature through birding, maybe through wildlife, maybe through different kind of treks, trails, and other things. We can just take people through these journeys and introduce them to nature. But to actually gain most out of tourism, we have to convert these visitors who are coming as people who can live with nature, who can start learning living with nature. Then only we can achieve the goal of sustainable development goals that the world has signed together today. So this is a small little, this we have shown through tourism. We have done through our 3 decades of working in the field. We have shown people that this is possible. We have shown people that ownership of local people is possible, and where people can come and get this kind of experiences. I would request organizations like Rare Earth and all of them, to kind of experience that and experience the luxury of nature, not the luxury of what we are used to back in the cities and giving them in nature, but the luxury of nature that has to be the pride that they would get by being like a local person over there. That pride, instead of just seeing it and appreciating it, is getting the pride, because it is the pride that tourism gives you to the visitor and to the host community together. When we share this pride, then we actually get the sustainability of it. So this is a little bit of small little experience that I wanted to. This one I think I wouldn't take 10 minutes also, because this is all I can say. But the rest will all depend on when you all come to the field. We share the field together. We see the field together, and we see these ownerships in conservation and tourism that has taken place in this landscape that I know I could travel, I could see. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Raj. I think you've taken us back to thousands of years in history. You've taken us back to rural and remote, and you've converted us all to biodiversity. I hope your vision and dreams are really transformed to a much higher plane than before. And I'm sure with support of organizations like IUCN, I don't think that day is far away. Husna, I got a question for you. Quick one. We've got 5 minutes more. Quick one. Responsible tourism. We won the award, most responsible tourist hotel in the country in 2020. What is responsibility and who needs to be responsible? The host or the visitor?
So Rajda has answered many of the aspects of responsibility that I wanted to speak to, but it's a two-way street, and it's getting more and more important after COVID and the situation we find ourselves with. as a hotel, we are responsible for the environment, we are responsible for the community, we are responsible for those 4 pillars that Rajda spoke about. And responsible tourism needs to be a transformative experience, and it needs to be conscious. So just as Shoba mentioned, those little symbols that we use as a group for RARE, you have to be conscious in having a belief, in making a choice, and about being aware. Now, a lot of these things travelers do not think about until they come to a responsible hotel where they see these practices being practiced in many of the ways that Raj just mentioned. And that will transform you as a traveler, because you may have kids that come and stay in a hotel that don't use plastic, and they'll go home and they'll tell their parents, actually, why are we using so much plastic? Or why aren't we composting? Or why are our sheets being washed so often when we could actually stretch them to longer? Or why don't we have a compost pit in the garden? These are transformative experiences that responsible travelers get when they visit responsible hotels, and people that believe this and promote it. And that's why it's transformational. And the reason why it's conscious is because a person who chooses to stay in a RARE style hotel, or a responsible hotel, or a homestay in one of the health tourism sort of networks, or what, in the communities that Rajda is speaking about, then we will be able to transform humanity, transform the planet, and come together as a human race to make everything better. And after COVID, it's going to be an added responsibility for the tourist, because today, when we are looking at how to open up, we are trying to question the people that are coming to us, saying, what are you going to do to protect our community? We don't want you to come, because you may bring that infection from a big city into our beautiful community that doesn't have a single case right now. Okay, and that is one of the reasons why we are putting economy to the side and saying we will not take the guests who are calling us up from Delhi and Mumbai, begging us to take them, because we are responsible to our community. And unless you can come and be a responsible traveler, promise us that you'll wear your mask, promise us that you will stay away from our staff and not ask them to be sort of overly in contact with you. If you can take that responsibility seriously, then you may visit our hotels, because we are a responsible hotel and we are responsible for the community and the spread of the disease. And that is going completely against the business model of wanting to get guests in as soon as we can, right? So there you go. Does that answer your question?
Perfectly. So a guest needs to take a pledge, Shoba?
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
Yeah, guest
Shoba?
pledge, yes.
Shoba?
Yeah, yes, guest pledge, yes, absolutely. They need to take a pledge. We also,
So we talked about economic mobility, we talked about social mobility, and we are just touching upon what Raj and Husna have been talking about, knowledge mobility. How will an evangelist like you actually take this forward at a much greater momentum that you have so far?
So, when we were talking about responsible tourism, we were looking at who are the stakeholders who will ensure responsible tourism, right? And like Rajda rightly pointed out, it begins with the travel. I mean, it begins with the lodge. It begins with the people who promote it, and ultimately it lies with the traveler. And then, of course, there are tour operators now who kind of endorse these kind of, they reach out to a larger audience. But for me, sustainability is the aspiration. Responsible tourism is our way to get there. So this is responsible tourism will ensure that we'll go there. And responsible tourism is also a larger blanket or an umbrella that puts the onus not only on the traveler, the tour operator, the lodge, and all the service providers, but also on organizations like IUCN, Responsible Tourism Society of India, TOF Tigers, and also the government officials and the state. Because unless and until some of these, like garbage, how do you, because I mean, with no offense meant, I think we as Indians are very poor at self-regulation. How to behave in a national park, how to behave in a community environment where the land is not mine. I mean, why would I go and ruin that particular destination? So when we don't have regulations in place, it is the state government with policies that will determine that some of the things that we are talking about becomes rules. And eventually, of course, when people start to come in and they start to see how a particular place is has been declared 100% eco-friendly or something like that, these are, I think, transformational ideas that they will walk away with, and also encourage other people to do. Like I said, it moves from people to people. It moves from references which is why marketing companies, Radha, I would love to leave everything and come and work with you on the field, but unfortunately I'm stuck here taking your stories, taking all the information that I get from all of you and all these inspiring stories. And believe me, Prabir, people love it. People actually love to know what happened to that. What are you doing because you don't want to use that plastic. Also, don't forget, traditionally, all of us, whether we lived in the tribal areas or not, I come from a very traditional Tamil family. Some of these things that for us today seems like like something that has come up. I was reading something about turmeric, which was a part of our everyday cuisine, and Starbucks went and made it into a turmeric latte. These are things that are been a part of our traditional upbringing. Thrift was a part of my growing up years. We didn't have a fourth dress to wear anywhere else, 2 uniforms and 1 to wear at home. Bringing these things back, and understanding that luxury is not about excesses. Luxury is also about space, light, time, beauty, environment, breathing space. And these are the ideas that we will take about. And I think it's a growing community. And I think COVID-19, one of the good things the crisis has taught us is people have started to smell the flowers and see the birds. So I think we're in a good space there. But we need to continue doing our work, because my fear is that when they say they're going to bounce back and they say sustainability will take a back seat, the rare community says, sorry, for a virus whose only defense is water and soap, we are not going to get paranoid and start using these use and throw products. So, there it is.
Thank you so much. And luxury for a lot of us now is to actually hug a tree.
Yes.
I
Probably
think
even hugging friends and family, and hugging you guys. I haven't seen you all in such a long time, so everything is now a luxury.
I know. No, but thank you so much. I think, Dr. Saxena, I think we have stuck to our time, though we are 15 minutes behind schedule, but we are within our time frame of an hour and a half. So any closing remarks from you? I personally think this was a very insightful, very educative session, and I'm sure the words and your stories and your insights will reach a much larger audience as we go along through other social media platforms. And
Prabir,
I
a
would
little bit
request,
about naturenomics and tourism. If I can just put a line about naturenomics and tourism.
of course, most certainly.
Yes, because because what happens, with this COVID-19, there's a lesson for the world. What we have been trying, all of us have been trying together, to teach them what responsible, what ecotourism, and all these things were. It was extremely difficult. But now, with naturenomics, we can really define it, because the ego has been taken care of. What economics gives you is ego. It doesn't give you anything beyond that. So the ego has been taken care of. So all those who have lot of money, lot of economic resource, they can now come and exchange it with people who have lot of nature with them. So this is the time for naturenomics to go. If Bhutan can grow on gross national happiness, we can grow on naturenomics. So this is what tourism can do, tourism can build today. Please, thank you.
Super. Thank you so much. Perfect. This is a perfect ending to our 1.5 hour insightful dialogue, if I may say so. And thanks again, Dr. Saxena. Some closing remarks from you will be great before we sign off.
Thank you, all the eminent panelists and all the attendees for a very, very wonderful webinar on such an important topic. And IUCN, as you know, its mission and vision is influence, encourage, and assist society. And IUCN is already insisting and developing the nature-based solutions standards. And certainly, these solutions provide us an insight, the way we want to see our future, because tourism is one of the sector which we can't ignore, because it generates in India itself, I think, more than 4 crore livelihoods, and that all have linkages with various type of businesses and other linkages, which are some are very prominent, visible, and some are invisible. But those linkages and that all value chain has been suddenly disrupted. And at the same time, the COVID crisis is also rooted somewhere in the disconnect with the nature or our disruption of the ecosystem. So the ecosystem services needs to get prominence over the economics, which we perceive. So the nature economics, which you have coined this term, and during the IUCN, this webinar series of tourism related, what are the challenges and what way we need to see the tourism, because this was the 5th in the series. We earlier had related to the coastal, the mountain, the adventure, and all this is a very, very important thematic area. And I hope when we have all the completion of one more webinar is still left. So the learnings from these webinars and whatever compilations of that can be very useful for the policy inputs. And I think together the IUCN network as a conservation organization, we have in India itself more than 40 institutional members, and including the Ministry, Government of India, Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and more than 800 IUCN Commission members. So this strength of network, which is basically the knowledge-based or the research-based conservationist, they really bring into the conservation aspect into the building into the economics, because when we calculate the economics, certainly we ignore the nature contribution or the ecosystem services. And this is the time when we are seeing that we need to care for the nature, we need to take care of the nature, because we need nature. Nature has enormous number of species. Human beings is one of those species. So we need nature for our survival. Nature may or may not need us. I think with these words, I thank everyone once again, and really grateful for your very, very, you can say, valuable suggestions, your experience and your further guidance and your insight in what way this subject is important and relevant. And thank you very much once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are humbled. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saxena. Thank you so much. Thank you, Prabir da. Thank you, Raj da. Thank you, Husna.
So much. Thank you so much. Thank you.